I had a viewer a couple of weeks back suggest that why don't you read a chapter or something from your book? She said that she had watched another YouTube psychic, I assume, a YouTube person at least, read some from his book, and it intrigued her about the book and about the channel, and she subscribed because of that and thought it might be a good idea for me. And of course, anybody that's watched any of my videos or a lot of my videos know that I have written a book called Off the Hook. It's about my journey from growing up in a toxic religious environment to getting away from that and forming my own belief system and my own spiritual outlook on life. And it's in 3 parts. The first part has to do with talking in very great detail about the toxic environment I grew up in so that any reader could understand what I'm talking about, why it was so fear-based, why it was so damaging to my psyche. The second part goes into some of the beliefs that I have changed over the years, how I look at God and Jesus and the Bible and all kinds of topics. I have a chapter on each one of them. And then the third part has to do a little bit with how process that if you are still in a toxic environment like that, a process for getting out of it that I think will probably apply to anybody that's still in that situation. But I think I can correctly assume that anybody watching this channel has already done any escape that they had to do to get out of a toxic religious environment, particularly that they were born into, and they're now on a spiritual path, or they wouldn't be watching this channel in the first place. So I am going to read a chapter from the part 3 of the book. In fact, I'm going to read the first part of the last chapter called Coming Full Circle. And by the way, before I start, stay with me. I've got a good surprise announcement near the end of the video. So here we go. Coming full circle. I start every chapter with a quotation. This one is, "The more things change, the more they stay the same." Jean-Baptiste Alphonse Carr. We humans have a tendency to overreact when we try to distance ourselves from a situation we no longer want to be in. When we leave home as young adults, for example, we often try to be as different from our parents as possible, even though friends and relatives know that in many ways we are exactly like them. When we are served one bad meal at a restaurant, we tend to vow that we'll never eat there again, even though there may be no credible evidence that the other places where we do eat are less likely to prepare bad food. After experiencing a rough flight in air travel, some people become so terrified of the thought of crashing that they quit traveling by air and would rather travel by car, even though statistically air travel is much safer. When we leave a repressive religion, many of us tend to find a belief system that feels as opposite to it as possible. When a person leaves a repressive religion and settles into a comfortable opposite worldview, he or she is likely to realize eventually that the oppositeness was really an illusion. For one thing, people do not usually really change their basic character all that much over the course of their lifetimes. They change their terminologies and the labels they attach to people and ideas, but their core values are likely to be essentially intact as they shift them to a new context that appear very different. Also, religions and worldviews are such complex networks of concepts and ideas that the prospect of finding something opposite to them is not as easy as it might first appear. I have discussed extensively, meaning in this book, how different definitions of terms can make the same thing appear to be two or more very different or even opposite things to people of different mindsets. In my case, as I look back over my life, I am both shocked in one sense and delighted in another to discover how little has really changed in my life as I have distanced myself from Christian fundamentalism and define myself as a spiritual warrior. I strongly prefer different terminologies, but I am the same person with pretty much the same core values. I have changed my beliefs drastically, in a sense, but I am still a person of faith. Although I have refused to take on faith any belief that can be disproved by science, I still take on faith certain beliefs that can't be disproved by science. I have beliefs that serve to ease my mind about those unknowable things that may or may not exist beyond that which is observable. I have come, sort of, full circle. My core values include love, kindness, compassion, honesty, and integrity. I was taught those values as a child, and I still hold them today. Nothing has changed except the stated reasons for their importance, and in some cases, even the stated reasons are a matter of reinterpreting the meaning of words. For example, I was taught that God is love, and that God wanted me to be kind and honest. I no longer believe God is the divine being in the sky, and I prefer the word source rather than the word God because of its conventional connotations, to refer to the animating life principle or spirit that I feel inside of me. But in my own mind, I can comfortably reinterpret the word God to mean the same thing. I have become self-referential, believing that I am responsible for my own values and guidance. But to the point at hand, my core values have not changed. My concept of self, as in self-referential, have expanded. The term self with a capital S is used by many spiritual teachers to refer to the spiritual nature that transcends the human physical nature. One aspect of this concept is higher self, which is viewed by some as the divine part of our human beingness. Another way of looking at the self is that all of spirit is interconnected, and all of us are individualized parts of spirit. We are all one, many spiritual teachers have said. The human mind, and especially the ego, tends to balk at actually believing such a statement, but I believe in its essential truth. I believe there is a self, which is a unified universal spiritual entity, of which each of our individual spirits are a part, and that God is just another name for that self. Relatively recently, I realized that I had been looking on my process for many years as a primarily intellectual one, making sense of the world by defining in words what my beliefs were. It was a habit I came by honestly. My religious upbringing clearly taught me that beliefs are essential, and to an extent they are. I believe that thoughtfully defined beliefs and theories are essential to living a meaningful life. If we have not examined the teachings that have been thrown at us and determined whether or not we believe they are true, we are merely following someone else's criteria for living, like lemmings following each other off the cliff. The intellectual exercise of defining between what one believes and what doesn't, and thereby constructing a coherent belief system for oneself, provides a roadmap through life, a track to run on. How do I know whether I am on the right track in my own judgment if I don't have a well thought out concept or belief system that I can refer to and quote as necessary to justify to myself why I said or did some particular thing? Still, I realize that there has been a very important emotional and spiritual component to my process from the start. In other words, my experience came about from the heart as much as, or more so, than from the head. I had internalized as a very young child the idea of spirituality, that there is much more to life than we can see. When I was all by myself as a child, thinking my own thoughts, I had feelings of rapture, you might say. Feelings that all was way well with the world. Even though I was being taught that God was a male being somewhere up there in the sky who would judge me when I died, my feeling when I was alone by myself and contemplating life was one of extreme peace and joy. I sensed the presence of something greater, and more wonderful than anything I was being taught about, which was in and all around me. In other words, I was having an important spiritual experience on a daily basis, which wasn't being acknowledged because of the religion I was being taught and the fear I felt when my consciousness was focused into the religious context. Much more recently, I have thought about more people I know who have decided that religious teachings are illogical, and being intellectually or scientifically oriented, they identify themselves as agnostics or atheists. I realized that I am a believer, a person of faith, not an atheist, because I believe in spiritual things which cannot be seen with the eye or scientifically proven. And that is because, as far as I'm concerned, all along I knew the source of all energy, which others attributing personhood to it, but mistakenly, in my opinion, were calling God. This source that I say I knew all along was something I felt inside myself as well as all around me, as opposed to something to be worshipped from afar. Realizing this fully took me from characterizing my journey as one of defining a set of beliefs to one of clearing from my mind all the thoughts which contradicted what my heart already knew to be true. Arriving at this realization was not so much another incremental movement forward into a new way of thinking, but rather a reassessment of how I had gotten to where I was. To use an analogy, it was as though I had moved from country to country all my adult life, trying to find an opportunity to move to the U.S. and become a citizen, and then after great effort to finally arrive here, only to learn that I had been born in the U.S. and I was a citizen all along. I'll say it again in other words. I racked my brain for years, trying to figure out what I believe, only to finally figure out that what I understood in my head is what my heart knew to be true all along. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I honestly didn't know how I, given my personal experiences, personality, and life situation, could have done it any other way. Although my family taught me to be spiritual and to believe in the Creator, I spent many years on a mental journey that felt like a long, tortuous one. Finally, I arrived at a very different place in my thinking. But had I changed dramatically in the process? I had to come to the understanding that in some very real ways I had been there all along. I said I had quit believing in the Old Testament God of judgment and wrath, and had come to believe in a Creator who is nothing more or less than life itself, consciousness itself, love itself, the source of all energy. My new realization was that I had always known life, known consciousness, known love, and in my heart I had always known that the angry, judgmental God that I was taught about as a child doesn't really exist. Yes, I have constructed a new belief system. My preference to call it a new life paradigm is not to deny that it's a belief system, but rather to emphasize the heart connection, that it's not just a head connection as I have just described. As I reflect back on my personal process and how I've put my beliefs and theories about the universe into practice, I realize that I have done a considerable amount of rethinking about the aspects of my life that caused me to want to change. Many of the things that felt negative at the time feel more positive now that I see how they help me get clear on what I wanted from life. Problems and obstacles, if we have learned from them, are powerful teachers. I have become more mellow and appreciative as I have looked back on the way in which my life has brought me to the peace of mind that I now feel. In the last step of the general process, and that's the set of processes I talked about earlier on how to escape a toxic ideology that I assume all of you watching this have already done if you're watching this. The last step of the general process, step 9, living according to one's specific beliefs, as I have described it, is not one that implies an end point. In fact, I'm still living it. I am still learning how to live more in concert with my beliefs and ideals. I have not identified any additional steps in my own life transformation process, but I have done some major reframing as I look back over my life. Looking back over one's life, as I have examined mine in these pages, is essential to making sense of one's progress. Steve Jobs, the late co-founder of Apple Incorporated, put it this way, and I'm quoting, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. This approach has never let me down and has made all the difference in my life." End quote. As I have matured spiritually, my perception of the differences between the beliefs I rejected and the ones I have adopted have softened. I am seeing my journey from a different, higher perspective. To use an analogy, when one is walking along a path from point A to point B, one's perspective is that journey is linear. That is, point A is back there in space and in the past in time. And point B is up ahead in space and in the future. But if one later climbs to the top of a hill, overlooking the entire path, both point A and point B are simply down there and in the present. From my current perspective, I am still the same me as I was all along. And the places I have been and the places I am heading toward are both facets of my life story that are available for observation. My transition feels like less of a drastic change in my life than it used to, because I've integrated the entire journey into an overall expression of who I am. Instead of a timeline, it looks more like a tapestry laid out within my view. I'm going to end the reading there. I trust it's been helpful. Okay, I have mentioned my wife Linda a number of times on this channel, and in fact she has always been the producer of this channel, meaning that every video I've ever done, even though she's never been on camera up to this point, she's been involved with. We go over the content of everything I record together. And I've talked on this channel about the fact that very soon we are both going to be on camera together talking about spiritual partnership and so on. And
hi everybody, it's so good to be here, and Earl, thank you for inviting me to be here.
welcome to the studio.
Thank you. We have had a wonderful time together as spiritual partners. We really started out at the very beginning that way. And we've got so many funny stories and things to tell you about, from doing weddings and carving sticks and making medicine bags and teaching classes and teaching Reiki and doing Reiki and messing with birds and dogs and all kinds of things that I'm sure some of you have done. Maybe all of those things you have done, maybe none. But the whole point is we love this wonderful community of spiritual people who are like-minded and who really resonate with the kinds of things that we very much care about and are working on. Now, one of the things that Earl and I have agreed to is this channel, Spirituality Connecting the Dots, is about finding many different ways to connect the dots. And we're inviting you for your comments and for your thoughts and for your suggestions, because maybe there are some subjects you would like to hear covered. I don't know how often, maybe once a week I may be with Earl, or maybe we'll do this frequently. We'll just have to see what the response is and if I can stop talking long enough to let Earl get a word in edgewise. I am a Leo. I like to talk.
She does have a lot to say.
I do, but I also like to talk. And I'm very silly, so sometimes Earl may decide that I'm a little much or not. I don't know. To me, laughter is the closest connection to God I can find, and I work on that every day. I try to start every day with some laughing, and often it's laughing at myself. I'm at the age now where I do a lot of crazy stuff. And then I've got this wonderful partner who treats me with such respect and such kindness, treats me the way that I hope that I can grow into to your level of awareness, your level of kindness, and your level of willingness to grow. There's a wonderful teaching, and I think it might be Zen, I don't know, I found it so many years ago. There are two ways of getting old. You can either grow old or you can get old. And I found somebody who's helping me to grow old, to release old patterns in partnership that don't work, things I learned from my parents, things that I learned from my first marriage, things that I just over the years hadn't even thought about correcting. And now I've got somebody over the last 30 plus years who's been working with me and allowed me to work with him. We inspire each other sometimes, and other times we have little knockdown dragouts, and that's part of being soulmates. It's not an easy relationship. It's an absolute relationship that will hold you to account. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So maybe that's all I need to say today is I'm so glad to be here, and there's so many wonderful psychics that we have loved watching over the years, and loved watching the way that they encourage and inspire and lift our spirits. These are very crazy times in some ways, and in other words, it's such a blessing to be here at this time. It's such a blessing to be able to share our thoughts, share our teachings, share our concerns, and find positive ways to look at that so that what we send out in the world is positive, healing, loving, inclusive energy. And everyone we've watched as far as psychics and tarot readers and funny guys like, oh, Clash Peters, you were so wonderful. We'd have her too all the time. And Sheila, oh, psychic, Celtic Sheila is one of our dearest friends. We talk with her often. And then there's darling Debbie, Freebird Spirit. And we get together with them often, and Debbie's partner, and just have a wonderful time exploring new ways of looking at things and new ways to have friendships that are based fully, truly on being spiritual friends. Not just let's talk about the weather or gripe at our grocery prices or talk about politics, although we do talk about politics a lot, don't we? But we see things getting better. And as we hold that vision, I feel like that's our work. To see things getting better, to see people coming to the point where there is a higher and higher level of the majority of us who don't want war. We don't want conflict. We want a beautiful, peaceful planet that we love together and that we pass on to our descendants with the same love that it was sent to us. All right.
And that's Linda, my lovely wife, partner, life partner, soulmate. And as she says, she likes to talk, but as I would rather put it, she has a lot to say. We will see you together soon.
Mm-hmm. Kiss.
Oh, okay.
No, don't. No kissing. No kissing the Queen of the Ball.
And I want to encourage comments. First of all, let me do this. The standard, please like, subscribe, and share. That helps a person getting started in the YouTube world tremendously. But I also want to emphasize the need to me for comments. I have several viewers that have been commenting pretty routinely on what they've heard me say and what they've watched me do. And they've appreciated it, and I really, really, really appreciate the feedback that I get from you telling me. So again, please like, subscribe, share, and please comment. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.